Our vision at Storied Church is to embody the inclusive love of Jesus Christ where every story matters.
And our mission at Storied Church is striving to embody the inclusivity of Christ by affirming and celebrating all people.
We do this by creating a safe and welcoming space where good can happen, cultivating meaningful relationships, where questions are explored and stories are honored.
We share life and ministry through gathering, worship, and service
so that our community becomes more just, compassionate, and whole.
If you'll join me in the prayer of illumination. God of small seeds and great hope, open our hearts to your word today. Plant in us your truth so it may take root and grow into acts of love and justice. Speak, Lord. We are listening. Amen. You're on.
All right, I think I'm good. Chomping at my bit, nervous energy, call it what you will. So today's scripture is from Luke. We'll be in chapter 9, starting with verse 51. When the days were coming to a close for him to be taken up, he determined to journey to Jerusalem. He sent messengers ahead of him, and on the way they entered a village of the Samaritans to make preparations for him. But they did not welcome him, because he determined to journey to Jerusalem. And when the disciples, James and John, saw this, they said, "Lord, do you want us to call down fire from heaven to consume them?" But he turned and rebuked them, and they went to another village. This is the word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. If you do not know me, my name is John. I grew up here in Alamance. I lived in Medmond for several years now. A few weeks back, we had our 6-year anniversary, and I shared that I've been like a long-time lurker of Storied's. So that's I've been watching what Storied has been doing, and it's been a community that I've come to love, even though I haven't been a part of it. That I got to just watch and see the values lived out that I was hoping more churches would live out. And now I'm here. And after a short time here, it seems like everybody's been like, "Hey, we need you to step up." So here I am. I found it interesting after being able to speak at the 6-year thing, and then especially with everything that's been happening in the news lately, that I asked Jason, I said, he asked me to teach today, and I said, I don't have any good ideas. And some churches operate on what's called a liturgical calendar, meaning there's a set scripture for each Sunday. And I just asked, what is it? And it just happened for this week, it would have been the verse that we read about Jesus not being welcomed, which was very striking compared to all the messages we heard at our 6th year about how welcoming Storied is, and also the state of our world that does not seem very welcoming. So with that in mind, I felt like this was very fitting that we are talking about welcoming, and here's a verse where Jesus is not. In verse 51, it says that Jesus determined to journey to Jerusalem. Now, in some translations, determined is set as Jesus set his face. So, meaning he stiffened his face. So you might know that if you've ever had to willingly walk into something difficult. So it's probably the same face that I make when I know I have to go tell my son to get off the screen. It's like, okay, it's been 2 hours, kid. You gotta... Okay, here we go. So when you have to do that, when you have to go into that difficult task, that's how I imagine Jesus in this moment. As he had to stiffen his face, he determined himself to go into something difficult. But it's not the first time where Jesus had to do this. So before verse 51, where he determined himself, he has already expressed his coming execution to the disciples twice. He has also had to drive out demons from people. He has raised the dead more than once. He's fed 5,000 people. He's appeared on a mountaintop with 2 prophets that everybody thought was dead. He also had to settle an argument between the disciples over which one was the best. So again, I feel like Jesus as this parent moment is really set, like it's really setting up there of, okay, I'm going to have to make some hard choices here. Also, by the way, none of the disciples were the favorite. But I'll save that for another sermon. The one thing that I've noticed, though, is through all of those events, Jesus worked through the disbelief of his disciples. And I think right now we're seeing more of that disbelief. And even more than disbelief, it's wrong thinking. So when he sends the messengers ahead, when he sends the disciples ahead to that Samaritan village, culturally, Jesus and the disciples probably would have known they were going to get turned away. That was not a very common relationship between people, is that Samaritans and Jewish people were like, they didn't exactly gel. However, what wasn't expected was for James and John to be so eager to come back to pray for the destruction of that village. Now, I don't want to assume everybody's familiarity levels with the gospel, but one of the things that happened prior to this is ahead of their visit to the Samaritan town, the disciples had just seen Jesus with Elijah and Moses. And there's this story of Elijah where he had this competition with these prophets of Baal. And he was like, oh, you say you serve a God. So this is way back Old Testament. He's like, all right, set up your altars, kill your calves, kill your cows, and we'll just see which God actually accepts the offering. Can you pray hard enough for your God to come and lick up this offering that you've made? So Elijah was this prophet, and he even was taunting the other people. He's like, maybe your God's out to the bathroom. You should pray louder. So Elijah's kind of saucy about it. And then on top of it, nothing happens. Elijah's turn comes, and he says, all right, drench my altar in water. Let's make it as fire resistant as possible. And in that moment, he prays, fire comes down, licks up all the water, and the land is completely dry, and the offering is vaporized. It's gone. So the disciples just saw this person with Jesus. So James and John are probably sitting there going, hey, we can probably call down fire too. Well, being turned away from that village and this idea of let's destroy them, Jesus instead rebukes them. This is not a gentle parenting moment from Jesus, okay? The word rebuke, that original Greek word, epitomao, is meant to be a hard chastising. This is not, like I said, this is not gentle parenting here. This is where he probably uses the same tone. It's actually the same word that's used when Jesus rebukes demons. So when this was written, they used the same word to say Jesus talked to his disciples the same way he talked to demons in this moment. Your thinking is wrong. This is not how we treat people that don't treat us well. And I think part of it is that parenting piece again. Now, as far as rebuking his disciples, there's a lot of people that are like, but what did he say? Everybody wants the gossip. What did Jesus say? And there is some older versions where we get a glimpse of what Jesus says. There's one where a verse is added and it says, and I don't know why, I just have to do this every time I read it like this because it starts with the word ye. Ye know not what manner of spirit ye are of, for the Son of Man is not come to destroy men's lives, but to save them. I don't know, I feel like anytime it starts with ye, I've got to sound a little bit like Gandalf. I don't know. Ian McKellen kicks in. But that part's been removed. We found out through research, things like that verse of what Jesus said is not in any of the original papyrus. That was just people trying to eliminate it or illuminate it and make it more flavorful. But it's not really there. So we don't know what Jesus says. So even though we don't know exactly what he said, I think it's less important of what he said and to know that he is correcting his disciples in this moment. When I think about the tone he takes, I feel like it's a little bit like me as a teacher or even with my own son. That chastising of why would you do that? Why would you say what you just said? There's this incredulousness because I think that comes out of the understanding that I know you know better. You have been with me. You have seen how I operate. You have seen what I expect. And your first thought, because they said, no, we don't want you in our village, is to destroy them? Again, you know better. So back at the beginning of chapter 9, around verse 5, because right now where we are is in verse 51. Okay. So earlier on, Jesus tells the disciples exactly what to do when you are rejected by a household or a village. Sweet. This really is like being in my classroom. No, it's okay. It's actually giving me a chance to read ahead right now. Make sure I don't skip anything. All right. So in verse 5, Jesus actually tells them exactly what to do. He says, if they do not welcome you when you leave that town, shake off the dust from your feet as a testimony against them. And then this is even repeated later in chapter 10. So after he has this moment with the Samaritan village, he then repeats that same thing. He's like, hey, I'm sending out 72 of you right now. If you run into a town or village that doesn't want you, shake the dust off your sandals and keep going. I think that advice especially applies to us today. We can make the effort to extend ourselves, to try and make ourselves understood, to be the best communicators that we can possibly be. And even myself, as much as I want to be the best communicator that I cannot force my way through somebody that refuses to understand. Now, notice I don't say inability to understand. It is the refusal to understand. I can work all day. I can have patience with people that struggle to understand. But when you are refusing to understand, that point is where Jesus gives this advice for us to say, shake off the dust from your sandals and move on. It's okay. Especially when I work with like new teachers, I know for me, and the data supports this, that most teachers will quit within their first 3 years of teaching. And it's a hard transition, especially if you're coming from a professional environment into teaching. Expectations are wildly different. And in that, I have worked with younger teachers that's their struggle, is they are very self-reflective. What am I doing wrong? What am I doing as a teacher that's not communicating? And I have to sit with them sometimes and just remind them, you can be the most engaging person in the world. But if you have people that are refusing to hear you, you will not be heard. Now, I think that's part of it, is that we have to know that difference of when is somebody just struggling to understand versus when are they refusing to understand. In this growing climate of us versus them, and everything seems to be escalating, especially with the advent of the internet. I've loved reading about this, the escalation of language. I mean, it used to be, I'd be playing a video game against somebody, and something bad would happen. I'd be like, oh, crap. And that's it. And then it turned into playing with my friends, and the immediate reaction was when something bad happened, I'd go, you suck. And now when I listen to my students talk about playing video games or they are insulted, they often resort to the immediate reaction of kill yourself. Kill yourself. So culturally, we are experiencing this escalation of language where everything has to be at its height. We use the strongest words possible. We use all of this emphasis, and yet we've lost the simple meaning of things. Another thing that's like an issue that I have is the number of times that like phones get taken out the moment that there's any kind of disagreement, and it becomes this escalation point. I don't mean as people taking their phones out as a way to like safely make sure that the situation is like recorded and like the truth comes out. That's different. But I've watched issues that could have just been a simple misunderstanding escalate into an actual fistfight, because the expectation of once cameras come out is you now have something to prove. So in those moments, there's not a lot of communicating that's happening, or at least it's not happening well. So maybe in those times, it's discerning when to walk away from that. Maybe it's not so much when to walk away, but how. And I think that's what Jesus is trying to teach here. He's trying to show his disciples how to walk away. If you're anything like me, sometimes when it's time to walk away, you do. And then I spend the next few days thinking about every possible comeback that I could have thrown at them. Oh, I should have said this. Oh, that would have been so good. All right. Or maybe you're the last word kind of person. Oh, and one more thing.
Does anybody have a red Mazda?
Red Mazda. All right, sweet. Thanks, God.
Yes, sorry.
No, you're good. So aside from that last word, maybe you've got one more thing that you've got to get out. It could also be that you just can't communicate in that moment. And it comes out as tears. And it could be from anger or sadness or rage. It's just, that's what comes out. But in this moment where Jesus says to knock the dust off your sandals and keep moving, I think that's Jesus' way of saying, you tried. And it's not some sympathetic pat on the back of, there you go, you did the best you could. And it's very patronizing. I think it's Jesus saying, you did everything that was expected. I sent you to the village. I sent you to do the difficult thing. I told you to stretch beyond your boundaries and go do something you didn't think you could do. And you tried. And that's okay. And in those cases where you can try, now you have to move on. And then how do you move on without allowing that moment to change you or make you bitter? To make you start to resent what you went through. Because I feel like that's what comes up with the disciples, is they had this moment with the Samaritan village that said, we don't want you here, go. Let's burn them down. Jesus is like, no, we don't do that. I think sometimes we have to know the dirt that we're walking through before we can knock it off of us. But just because you know you went through it doesn't mean you have to keep carrying it with you. So because we can't keep carrying things with us, I think the disciples might have been doing that. And Jesus realized it because later on we get the parable of the Good Samaritan. So after this event where the disciples wanted to burn down the Samaritan village for turning them away, we get Jesus giving the parable of the Good Samaritan. So I wonder how they felt. The same people that turned them away, and then Jesus' response to being turned away was, it's okay. Knock the dust off your sandals. Let's keep going. We got other places to go. But now that same village that didn't have any hospitality for them is the ultimate example of hospitality and generosity and care. I think the way we'd phrase that now is cognitive dissonance. Is how do we hold two things to be true at the same time? So the disciples just had this experience. Maybe for me right now, it's balancing my relationship with friends that are some of the most generous people I know, also supporting political ideas that are not generous. And then also, how do I support my friends that would be against that same person, that are so just fired up about their cause that they actually hope for and wish for the death of those other people? How do I balance that? Because both can be true at the same time. I think if I were to put myself in the shoes of John and James outside of that Samaritan village, if we were to imagine that person that we just cannot stand, that they make us see, like we have to acknowledge the hatred that we feel in us. And in that moment, I also have to imagine that determined face of Jesus against me. That parent that goes, okay, You know better. I don't think, and I think this is where some churches kind of go too far. I don't think that this is a fire and brimstone moment where the parent is going to come down with this authoritarian fist. I think instead, we're not in trouble, but we need guidance. And in those moments, where do I get my guidance from? Just like when I'm having a difficult moment with my son, and he is not doing what is expected. It is not what I have shown, it is not what I've lived out. We do not hit people like that. We do not bite. We do not throw those things. Whew, calm down, child, because that's not how we do it. He needs guidance in that moment. I need to remind him how we do things. And I think that's what Jesus needed in that moment. Did it come across as stern? Yes. He needed to get their attention. Now, during that study of the parables that we did over those several weeks, the stories that matter, we looked at the lost sheep, the lost coin, and the prodigal son. And Jesus uses that authority figure to display the character of God. We also get to be part of those stories as the people that celebrate. We don't just get to be the thing that Jesus found. All right, that's the most common the churches will point at. You are the lost coin, you are the lost sheep, you are the prodigal son, right? But what if we also get to be the people that celebrate? The one thing that we don't get to do is we don't get to be the seeker. We don't get to determine when something is found or comes home. That's not up to us. So in that bitterness, when we think about those people that have wronged us, the villages that turn us away, I also have to put myself back in the shoes of the prodigal son story of the older brother. I did everything you told me to do. I've been trying to live out these ideas. I've been trying to be the example that you said I should be. What about me? All these other people are clearly not doing it right, and here I am. What are you doing? I have to be cautious of that, because that's where that judgment comes out. That's where I start putting other people into other categories. And the danger of othering people, taking away their humanity, that is no good. So I think the idea of taking that town and Jesus later using them as the example in the Good Samaritan story is just a way of humbling the disciples. One thing that I've had to use more than once in my life, and it's not a Bible verse, it's just as I was working on this, as I was writing it, because I found myself thinking about that story of Jesus uses the Samaritan town to humble the disciples. Maybe you found yourself, as I was just like me as I was writing this, I was like, yeah, but what if they need to be humbled and they're learning from us? Again, it's like when somebody compliments you for being super humble. Oh, wow, you're so humble. Yeah, I know, right? You're shooting yourself in the foot there, boss. I think that's what happens is we tend to get in that idea of, well, who needs the humility? Yes, great, John. You've told me all this story about how the disciples been humbled about the story of the Samaritans, and that's for us. What about everybody else? Don't they need to be humbled too? Yeah. When they're ready to hear it. Again, if they're not ready to hear it, they won't. So in those moments where somebody may not be ready to hear it, and I have tried. The thing that comes to my mind, and again, it's not a Bible verse, was just this phrase of, if I have no grace for them, there is none left for me. If I don't have anything to give them, then I literally have none in my own hands. There's none for me either. I'll finish with this. After being refused by that Samaritan town, Jesus uses them as the good neighbor. And at the end of the parable, Jesus asks, which of these three do you think proved to be a good neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of the robber? One of the experts of the law replies, the one who showed mercy to him. Jesus finishes with, go and do the same. I hope that we can show the care and kindness and generosity to those around us that the Samaritan showed. I hope that we can also see ourselves as that Samaritan village, that we get humbled knowing that there are times that we have turned people away that Jesus would have wanted us to invite to a table. And like we pray at the end of each service, and we're going to pray it again today, is may we reach out our hands to comfort them, our neighbors, and turn their pain to joy. So I hope that this continues to be evident through Storied Church, through that welcoming and accepting attitude that we so preached and celebrated at our 6-year anniversary. So I am done. And in our tradition, we'll take a few moments for any thoughts and insights, because preaching is not just from right here, it is from all of us.
He says you're mine, a smile when I made you. I find you beautiful in every way. My love for you is fierce and unending. I'll come to find you whatever it takes. My beloved, my beloved.